wish I could tell you that I did manage to set boundaries and I was a one-man band, but absolutely not. I mean, I've got stories of being on holiday. I remember being in France and my manager ringing me after I'd been to Nikki Beach and I'd had like 2 bottles of rosé, and I was like, oh, bonjour.
Welcome to Confessions of a Social Media Manager with me, Erin from Agorapulse. Today I have with me a very special guest, Work in Social, they said. Now, Work in Social, they said, is like the gossip girl of the UK social media scene. But like, the original gossip girl, not like the tacky reboot that we have now. And if you don't know who they are yet, number one, why don't you? They are the anonymous social media manager posting memes and stories as a way to vent about the mundane horrors of working in social media. What is the most intriguing thing about them, though, is that they have successfully managed to straddle that fine line between getting the respect of social media managers and the brands that they work for. Their Instagram account started in December 2020, and the account then expanded to Twitter in February 2021. As of now, they have a combined follower rate of 49k in less than 9 months of starting the channel. And I'm sure that last sentence will spark equal amounts of awe and jealousy in our audience today. Of course, though, the very nature of Work in Social, they said, is anonymous. So this will be one of our more unusual interviews. We will not be revealing their name or their face or even much about their immediate work history. But what I can tell you is that they are currently looking after the social media for a large UK brand, supporting with strategy, content creation, and the brand overall on social channels. They have said that they have taken a roundabout route into working in social and have had many different jobs before this, settling in social media. And we asked them to describe their social media career in 3 words, and they said fun, exhausting, and creative. So I want to welcome Work in Socials, they said, to Confessions of a Social Media Manager. Hello.
Oh my God, hi. I was listening to that. I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Who's that person? But it was
That
me.
person is you. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to abbreviate your name, if it's okay, to Work in Social, because Work in Social, they said, is like a tongue twister for me. So can I say Work in Social?
You can.
Obviously, you've had this experience in social for a while now. You seem to have like been around the block. What what at what point do you like, I'm gonna make this meme account? Like, what was the turning point? What was the moment, the change in the wind in the day that made you think, I'm gonna post this?
Oh, well, I mean, honestly, it was very. So we've been through, the last year working from home, and actually, me as an individual, I got a little bit obsessive about COVID, if I'm honest with you. Like, I got a little bit like
Mm.
wrapped up in it. It was really not great for my mental health, like looking at the news. So I was like, I need a way to like stop thinking about what's going on in the world right now, because it's too much. Because I think Boris cancelled Christmas, and I was just like, oh, this is awful. And then at the same time as I was having those like thoughts, there were quite a few accounts that were just popping up online that were memes accounts of like different departments of the business, and actually there were loads of fashion accounts that opened at the same time. And I saw them and I thought, oh, that's really funny. Surely there must be one that's been set up for social media managers. I was like, there must have been, that must exist. So I was looking for it. I was like, social media manager memes, like life of a social media manager. And I was like, nobody's set this account up. But why has nobody set up this account that I'm trying to find and follow? So I was like, well, I'll just do it then. So I just set it up as like honestly a way to pass the time, to forget about COVID, to forget about the fact that Christmas was cancelled. And it was quite embarrassing actually, because I didn't have that many followers for quite a long time. But I was just making my memes and having a nice time. And then it just somebody shared it online. They shared a meme on LinkedIn. Someone with quite a lot of followers, and overnight I just woke up and I like had 1,000 followers, and I was like, what has happened? And then embarrassingly, some of my colleagues had started following it and talking about it, and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. Everyone's gonna know I'm gonna get fired. But
Wait. So when they followed it, did they know it was you?
no.
Oh my God, that's so hilarious.
No, they were like sharing it in our Slack channels, and I was like, "Oh God!"
No! Oh my God, you must have been like, your face must have gotten so hot. I could just imagine it. You just like, your like heart is pumping like, that is me, that is me, that is me, that is me.
Yeah, I mean, I was worried I was going to get fired, really. That was kind of the main thing that crossed my mind.
Mm.
But yeah, so really the account was just designed, in all honesty, to be a bit of fun, a bit of an escapism. It has obviously grown like beyond anything that I ever intended it to or like attempted to make it be. It just, yeah, it just became what it is. It's a lot actually when I think about it for too long.
Yeah. So at what point did you like break the news to your colleagues? Did you have to like sit them down and get like put in like a proper Google Meets meeting? It was like, guys, got something to tell you. I'm not leaving, but that is me.
No, I just dropped it into the Slack channel a few hours later. I was like, yeah, it is me. And then I spoke to my manager and I was like, am I going to get fired?
Oh, that's kind of anticlimactic for me. I was hoping that you would like, you know that thing when people are like in Slack, they're like, do you have like 5 minutes for a quick catch up? And your heart just races because you think either you're gonna get fired or they're leaving or something has happened. And like I was hoping you would have just dropped a bomb like that and made like milked it, but you clearly was just like, yeah, it's me.
Yeah, it's worse now that obviously if we have new people join the team, they're quite often already familiar with it. So back when my colleagues found it, I only had like 200 followers, so it didn't really matter. I was like, oh, you've just found like my little memes account that I'm just doing for fun. But now obviously when new people join the team, they're like, oh my God, that's you! I can't believe it. And I'm like, oh yeah, now it's probably a bit of an anticlimax. That's why I never really tell anybody because I feel like it's so much better being mysterious.
If, you know, someone had come up to you and said they want to start a career in social media, what would be the first piece of advice you would give them?
Well, I'd say bank your sleep in advance and bank your weekends and enjoy that time before you start on the Monday of your first social media job. But I think, other than that, the advice of someone looking to get into social is I think you've got to be a native user yourself. I think you have to understand the platforms, you have to understand the people that are using them and what feels relevant to each of those platforms, and understanding every single social media platform has its own vibe, it's got its own sense about it. And yeah, that would be my number one piece of advice, I think, is to just immerse yourself in those platforms before you start thinking about creating content and trying to create any kind of brand online.
That is brilliant advice.
Oh, thanks.
Right off the bat, you were like, you didn't say don't, but you were like, actually work on it. And that is, I think, really relevant to a lot of people, as in like the way that I started in social, it was like, I did it in a really weird way. Like I studied linguistics at university, and part of that was like the language of social media, and that made me understand how social media works, just as its bare bones. So I would definitely repeat the advice that you said of just like immersing yourself in it beforehand before you start going for those intern roles, assistant roles. So when things come up, you're not totally on the back foot that you can sometimes be in social.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of us who have been in social media for a while have probably had quite a roundabout journey to get there. Because actually, if you think to 10 years ago when I was at university, social media wasn't really the same place it is now. And if you were doing a marketing degree, which I did not, by the way, but if you were doing a marketing degree, social media would have been a very, very small part of that. And the understanding of it would have been particularly low because it wasn't as big or anywhere near as big as it is now. So I think most of us who are further on in our career have learned a lot of what we know simply by being on social media and trying things out, watching them fail, watching them succeed, and working it out as we go.
Absolutely, and this is why part of the reason we wanted to do this series is because social media managers as a role have evolved year from year. Like they're all changing, and we can't say what this role is going to be in 3 years' time. So with this, we want to definitely have like a sort of vibe check of where social media managers are right now and trying to chart the work history of the people in the industry. So like, yeah, no, definitely, I definitely agree with that. So what is a typical day for you then as a social media manager? How do you describe it?
I don't want to use any cliches, but every day is different. But typically, the structure is quite similar day to day. So I get an A, and the first thing that I start doing is I look at all the numbers that have come in overnight, including like revenue, so traffic and sales, what's come in from social. I look at how our posts have been performing. So I do like a bit of a recce, if you like, across the platforms and see where we're up to. Then we have our first team meeting, and we always have team meeting at 9 a.m. where we just basically all stand up, metaphorically, but if we're in the office, it would be literally, and talk about what we've got on that day, talk about anything that we've seen overnight, what the plans are, what we're going to be working on. And then the rest of the day will just kind of depend on any at any one time we could have 100 different projects on. So I might be in project meetings about particular campaigns that we're running or particular creative that we're trying to push forward. We may have schedules that need to be checked over. So I actually manage quite a large team, so I have to check all the schedules as they're coming through, and we do that on a weekly basis. So yeah, looking at content that's been created, seeing if it's in line with the brand, seeing if it's in line with our objectives and our strategy. So yeah, various different things, all centered around social content, I suppose.
That's a rigorous day.
Yeah, it is quite structured. It is quite structured. But within that structure, there is of course flexibility. But as I said, we have quite a large team, so there's a lot that needs to be done and a lot of platforms that we're looking after.
So what point did you realize we need to have this kind of structure in place to make sure social runs as smoothly as it does?
Well, firstly, I would say that things don't always run as smoothly as you might think. We, of course, have like our hiccups along the way. I think that I've always been quite a structured individual. So I have always enjoyed having boundaries that help me work out how to do my role. But I think maybe the point where I felt as though this is super important is probably twofold, actually. The first one is one of my favourite social media moments in history is the infamous Super Bowl Oreo tweet when during the 2013 Super Bowl, obviously the lights went out and Oreo came out with that tweet where they said like power out, no problem, you can still dunk in the dark. Went viral. Like it's almost part of the social media history now. And they came out with some interviews where they were talking about how they as a team worked together so seamlessly to get that out. And throughout the entire interview, everything they're talking about is how they work together as a team with like military precision. They know exactly who would be doing what, who would be writing the copy, who would be pressing the send button. They had everything planned down to a T. And I think one of the quotes is, like, short of a meteor falling out of the sky, we knew exactly what would happen. And that always really resonated with me. And I just felt like, actually, creativity is the thing that makes it exciting and drives it forward, but structure, precision, clarity is what actually helps a team to function together at that pace and at that speed, which is so important on social media. So there's that, which I think was a turning point for me. And then I think within my own career, and I guess we'll talk about this a little bit later, but in terms of mistakes that I've made, typically those mistakes have always been when the structure's not been in place and people don't understand what's being asked of them or what the expectations are.
Absolutely. I was going to say, like, that sounds like a dream world. Like this well-oiled machine of someone, they're the person to send it, they're the person to like put the copy in. What kind of, like, I'm just curious because you've gone so into this structure that I did in a way that I did not expect. But what kind of like,
Also, seem chaotic, don't I?
no, yeah, but you give a cool vibe, right? But secretly you very much know what's going on at all times. What key skills, let's say 3 skills, do you think you need to have to be able to sort of bring that structure into the workplace?
So, key skills, I think, maybe not skills as such, values, I think that I would bring is number one, first and foremost, is transparency or visibility. And that's what I say with any team that I'm working with. Like, we can't even begin to work out what's going wrong in this team or where we could make improvements if we don't understand as a team what we're even working on in the first place. So number one, it's getting that visibility in. So as a team, we have daily stand-ups, we have planning meetings where we're constantly realigning, readjusting and recalibrating what the team is working on. So I'd say that, where structure tends to fall down and where people get this kind of feeling that process is a bit of a dirty word in some ways is when people kind of expect plans to just fall into place because you have the original plan, you lay out what everyone's doing, and then you just send it off into the atmosphere and hope that it kind of falls the way that you expected it to. And that's not actually how projects work. You, of course, have your plan and you think about what that's going to look like, but actually, to get to the end point, to get to the goal, to get to the destination, it's that constant recalibration within the team where everyone is talking about what they're working on and understanding what the wider objectives are of the team. So I think transparency is a big value as a part of that. I think there has to be very clear objectives for a team. So really setting a vision, and not just a vision, but a goal. Like, what's the impact that we're trying to drive? Because it's very easy to get lost in the noise of like, what are we doing day to day? but so many of the things that we're doing are not actually meaningful. They don't drive impact. So we're just going through a piece with our team right now where we're trying to move people away from the teams that they're a part of and talk about what are the goals that we are trying to achieve. You are a team member within that who brings a certain set of skills, but actually what we should be thinking about is the impact we're driving as opposed to your role within that, for example. So yeah, I think clear objectives and goals is another value that I would bring. And I think the other value I guess that I would bring is alignment and everyone being on the same page, which I guess comes from that transparency and that clear objective setting. But as I said, that recalibration all the time.
Could I ask though, like obviously, you can't tell me too much, but what is the structure of your team then? Is it like are you a separate social media team within the comms team, or are you a mix?
No, so we are a separate social media team, and there's 20 of us right now in that team.
Wow. So that goes from, would we say, social media managers to the assistant, to the copywriter, graphic designers, that kind of, is that the kind of roles we have in that team?
No, so actually that's just the social team that look after the channels and look after like the community management and the comms plans, if you like. But we also have influencer teams. We have creative teams that look at concepts and the graphic design, etc. So yeah, we sit actually within a wider team that looks specifically at like brand.
Wow. My mind is blown that there is this perfect team out there. I've got this vision of this perfect team out there that knows exactly what is going on at all times.
Oh, we're not perfect.
And
We're not perfect. I can tell you that. I've just sold you a dream. We are. we definitely. We definitely have our challenges. That's for sure.
obviously you can't give away too much, but what is the most exciting thing that you're working on at the moment within your team?
Gosh, the most exciting thing. I mean, I feel like the most exciting thing genuinely for me is the content that we're putting out day to day. That's what drives me. That's what I find exciting. It's not necessarily these bigger campaigns. It's actually those pieces of content that drive the channels forward day in, day out. I love the social media landscape because it's constantly changing. So, for example, right now, one of the things that I find really interesting is how we can start to adjust our Instagram strategy to capitalize more on Reels, for instance, which sounds in principle quite boring, I suppose, and maybe in many ways it is. But for me, that's exciting because it's a change and it's working about how we pivot, how we shift, how we adjust what we're doing to basically ride this weird social media wave that we find ourselves on.
So could I ask, so do you work quarter by quarter, or is it very much like month by month, we've got to do this? So how do you decide to shift gears, and when you realize, obviously at that point where you like sort of cut off the fat and be like, well, this idea sucks now, we're gonna have to experiment with something else.
Well, so for each of the channels that we run, we do have an annual strategy where we look generally at what we're trying to achieve on the channel, what audience we're going after, what the content strategy is generally. But I always say to the team, and I say the same thing to you, is actually in a year's time when we come back and reflect on these strategies, we probably will have made some changes. And actually, I'd be probably quite surprised and disappointed if we hadn't made some changes to that, because it would mean that we kind of gone down the path of this plan without thinking about the wider context of what's going on. So we do have annual strategies, but they're relatively loose and look more at top line, like who are we going after, what's our general content pillars and strategy. But in terms of campaigns, are done on more of like a 6 to a 12-month basis. So we look generally at like those energy moments that are going to happen throughout the year and make sure we're planning for those. But in terms of the actual schedules and the content that we're putting together, that's done on a week by week basis and sometimes day by day.
Oh, day by day. Is that like seat of the pants, sort of like get this out now? Does that happen enough or a lot? I wouldn't say enough. No one wants to hear that every day, like post it tomorrow now. But like, is that something you can have to contend with in a big brand? It's like, you've either got to be, how reactive do you need to be with them?
I think you've got to be prepared to be incredibly reactive. Because my pet peeve actually is when I talk about work-life balance for social medias and needing to make changes, and people always say, "Oh, have you tried a scheduling tool?" I'm like, it's not, it's not to do with the scheduling. It's to do with the fact that you could have a week's worth of content scheduled and ready to go. But then a really good example of this, and I'm sure most people will resonate with it, is that COVID overnight, the world changed, everything changed, and we were looking at content plans that had been put in place months ago, thinking this is no longer relevant. We can't post this. We'll look like we have no idea what's happening in the world right now. So yeah, I you've got to be prepared to be incredibly reactive. That's obviously a macro event, but then internally within a company. So, if, for example, launch dates shift, if you're releasing products, or again, COVID's had a big impact on that with like worldwide shipping and freight. We had to be prepared to turn things around within, hours when we've got news in that things weren't going to turn out the way that we planned, and we need to shift our schedules to accommodate that. So, yeah, I think you have to be prepared to be incredibly reactive.
Do you think there is a certain mindset you need to be in to work in big brands and social? Because it feels like from what you're saying is that you sound like a sergeant major. Like there is I come across social media managers who are very much sort of doing it for themselves, and, marketing their own brands, or or they aim to sort of have fun. I'm not saying you don't have fun, but like 'cause you clearly do. But like the is there do you think social media managers, when they're sort of shifting from role to role and they're trying to sort of experiment on their CV as much as they can, what would you say to them if they're going to go into a big brand that has a huge structure behind them? What would you say to them?
I mean, a big brand, you have to be flexible. You have to think about your stakeholder skills, so who you're liaising with, because if you're working within a big brand and you've got a lot of people, you've got a lot of people's opinions, you've got a lot of people's expertise that you're, trying to incorporate. It's not just about you and what you think is right. It's about what's right for the business, and it's about what's right in the context that you're in as well. So you have to be prepared to listen, because you're not always the person that has the answers.
No, that's very good advice. I think I myself learned that sort of by trial and error. You very much have to sort of vibe check the place you're coming into, and see where you can either where you don't need to make. Sometimes you do have to make waves. Sometimes you have to be the person to bring these structures into places. I found sometimes, or or you kind of slot into something that's already been working well for them. So it's sort of like just hope to God at that interview stage you can figure that out and whether you're happy with it. Because I've been in places where I'm like, I am not entirely happy the way that things are going here, and it's hard to sort of kind of make that impact. Have you found that in your career where you've gone into places where like you're just sort of shocked, like, are you doing things in an Excel spreadsheet? Like, has there ever been those moments where you're like, this is not a well-oiled machine, and I don't know where I'm going to fit into this?
Oh well, I think naturally, as I said, I am that person who enjoys bringing in the structure. So quite often that is a skill that I bring into a team, and that's probably in most instances why I'd be hired into a team, because they'd be missing those skills. So I think it's not so much that places are doing things poorly. It's just that maybe they're not doing them in a as you said, like this well-oiled machine way. But it's all about, I think, understanding what skills it is that you bring to the table. Because, for example, like I need people around me that bring that creativity and bring that, real, that out of the box thinking. And actually, my manager is very much like that. And that works really well, because actually he's always promoting me to think outside the box and kind of push the boundaries, which is I'm quite a creative person, but I think I very much benefit from being surrounded by more creativity, because I can always work to ground a team. I don't need more of that.
Fascinating. So how do you measure success on social media with your brand right now?
So, of course, there are the metrics, and there are the metrics that most people will be familiar with. So, your engagement, whether your audience is growing, whether or not you're hitting your traffic goals, your social goals. Sorry, your sales and revenue goals. I think also sentiment is a big part of it. So, how your community are responding to your posts, and that's a little bit more challenging to measure in terms of a quantitative way, but I think it's still really important to keep track of that. But something that I kind of, again, I say to the team when we're looking at their annual strategies and talking about how will we know that we've done a good job. And one of the things I always say to them is, are you going to feel proud of the content that you put out? Are you going to feel pleased with what you did with that platform you've been given? And I think we can't measure that per se, but it's a feeling that as a team we're talking about a lot.
Now, customers are expecting so much more from brands than they were a year ago, 2 years ago, and you cannot underestimate the kind of scrutiny that you're under. I think that is probably the anxiety spikes of like working in social media, is that like it's not like it's an internal email or internal newsletter with a company that is understands everyone in the room. You are getting it dissected by thousands of people, and one mistake or one something that's a little bit off is going to be maximized in a way that you do not always like. So I think that is part of the sort of like that. I love what you're saying about how be proud of what you're doing, because if you're going to be proud of it, you're not going to let anything slip. With organic versus paid, though, now organic versus paid is such a big conversation that everyone is having. What is your stance on organic versus paid?
Well, I think that they work hand in hand. I think you can't really have one without the other. Particularly if you've got big ambitions for the brand that you're working for or the company that you're working for. Um, I think that you need to focus on both. Really, they have different goals. They have different things that they can achieve. So we often talk about the organic arm of social very much being about your community, being about your current customers, like listening to them, working out, what's right for that community, and kind of, you can obviously have those, and I hate to say it, but you can have those viral moments, but actually if you want to bring in a new audience, that's where your paid strategy is really going to start to pay dividends, no pun intended, because that's where you can reach people who don't already follow you, bring them in, and whether that's to your social channels, whether that's to your website, if that's where you're directing them to, whether it's to like your app, if you have an app that you're trying to grow, then obviously the goal could be set depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. I always think paid is super important if you want to start looking at how you grow your audience.
And where have you sort of specialized in yourself? Like, are you more of an organic person, or are you much more like you can come to me for paid stuff?
So I have done both in the past, but now I'm very much focused on organic, and that's although I said that we've got a big team, we do, but that's only the organic team. We also have another team that manage our paid strategy, which is probably the same again in terms of size.
So if you're organic orientated, do you want to share like a top tip, maybe for like now, maybe the one top tip that works now for organic? Do you have one?
A top tip for organic? I mean, any particular channel or just generally my thoughts around tips?
Let me pluck Instagram out the air, because Instagram right now seems to be a battle between um, paid advertising, e-commerce, and video content that also has to get pushed on paid. Where would you say is a top tip to kind of generate organic sort of success on Instagram?
I think the best way right now to organically grow a page is, well, actually, without any paid support, so I won't give you that second tip. The first one I think is to utilize Reels. I think Reels have obviously got a huge, huge driver behind them from Instagram. You can, like, it's so much easier to reach a new audience on Reels than it is via any other medium on Instagram right now. And I actually noticed that on my memes account. If I'm using Reels, like if I use a Reel in a week, my insights will shoot up so that suddenly like 3/4 of the people viewing my posts are not currently following the page, which is insane. If you then take away the reels, it will switch right back to kind of like 75-80% all current followers. So I think reels are one of the best ways right now to reach a brand new audience.
I feel like the amount of times I've heard the word reels in the past 2 months, like I may go a little bit insane. I don't know when I'm gonna crack. Like it feels a bit like Beetlejuice, and you gotta say it 3 times, and then a reel's gonna turn up behind you. But yes, reels is definitely gonna be the thing of 2021, I think.
Yeah, and I think you have to embrace it. I know everyone's talking about it, but it's because it's true.
Yes, sadly, it is true. Fleets have gone. Reels are here. Reels are here to stay for the foreseeable future until Mark Zuckerberg says so.
Yeah.
We've touched on this before, though, but I have to ask about the work-life balance of a social media manager and how you manage it. Because not only do you have working for your brand, which sounds like the good place in terms of social media management, social media teams. But also, you've got this meme account that is blown up and is very consistent in its posting frequency and its tone and its engagement with people. How do you manage your life?
Well, I would say that if you're looking for work life balance, setting up an account on the side is not something that I would recommend for anybody. And in terms of the consistency, I just can't help myself. I think because I know what it takes to grow an account and to keep it alive. I just, I'm just my own worst enemy. I could step away from that account and it would probably be fine. But yeah, as I said, I just can't really help myself. So I'm probably not the best person to talk to in terms of work-life balance. However, when I only had the one full-time job as opposed to like the 2 or 3 that I have now, because I also have a newsletter that I write as well. So I just, classic me taking on too much. We are quite good in our team, and I appreciate that this is only possible if you have a team around you. But if, for example, you are taking annual leave, we hand over all the channels to somebody else. So people are posting, they are like managing your channel for you whilst you are away, which means you are able to switch off. We utilize auto posting where we can, although granted that's not always the case. Again, like a scheduling tool's not going to help you put a poll out on a Saturday night if that's what you need to do as part of your strategy. So
Can we say to Twitter right now, for the love of God, please release the API so I can do a poll and schedule it. So I have to log in at lunchtime to do a poll. I'm going to put that out there and manifest that thought.
yes, please, God, I actually think about a tweet not that long ago. I was like, dear platforms, an open letter to you. Just open up the API for God's sake. Like it would help so many people. But then, it's not gonna help us to quickly readjust our strategy if we need to, which is often the case as well. But yeah, it would go a long way to helping for sure.
I mean, if you want to team up on an open letter to Twitter, I would happily co-sign like how MPs do and do these little letters. I will do one to them. Like I really think I want to air some feelings that it's not going to go through Twitter support. So
Even Business Suite that allows you to schedule stories, but you still can't schedule stickers. I don't understand.
yeah,
Don't get
I
it.
mean, I think I would love to say try Agorapulse now because we're a social media scheduling tool and we can do those things. But even we have limits when the API is not going to open. With like the work-life balance, do you have any sort of tips to people in on how to actually sort of put some things in place to make sure they don't go sort of crazy? Like you touched on the fact that you know having people take on responsibilities and annual leave in the team, coordinating that means that you are going to be relatively peaceful on your own annual leave and getting that covered. But would you say have you ever been in the position where, you have been a one-man band or part of a very small team where that has not sort of um, been in place? And have you had to set boundaries with that? How have you approached that?
God, I mean, I wish I could tell you that I did manage to set boundaries and I was a one man band, but absolutely not. I mean, I've got stories of being on holiday. I remember being in France and my manager ringing me after I'd been to Nikki Beach and I'd had like 2 bottles of rosé, and I was like, oh, bonjour. Turned out that we had, oh, it was a nightmare. We were a publicly listed company, and yeah, even though we were a publicly listed company, it still had just me running the entire social strategy. And because of that, no one had been able to tell me, because I wasn't on the insiders list, that we were doing a massive launch. So they just waited until I was on holiday to ring me and say, by the way, we've got a huge launch that's being announced tomorrow. It was actually a merger. So obviously, because it was publicly listed, like nobody internally was allowed to know. But then they pulled me onto the insiders list whilst I was on holiday. And I just thought, well, what do you expect to do? What do you expect to do about now? Like, I've not got my laptop with me. I don't even have like access to the social accounts. So they're like, don't worry, you can sort it out on Monday. But we just wanted to let you know that that needs doing for Monday morning.
So why have you ruined the rest of my week in an anxiety panic to make me panic when I get in on Monday?
Exactly. So, no, I wish I had stories of me telling you that I laid down the law and set my boundaries, but I did not. Of course, I didn't. I was like, yeah, sure, no worries.
I don't blame you because if someone told me there's a public merger and you've got to write something, I would just like freak out. I would freak out. But I think when it comes to sort of boundary setting, but also sort of like I will even like go into that the sort of norms and customs of the UK and Ireland and the way that we sort of approach things, it's sometimes hard to actually say to somebody gently no. We're very much sort of like still people pleasers in the workplace, and I feel like social media are on the end of like a lot of people pleasing, whether it's the your audience or the people immediately behind you from like different teams in the organization saying, "Oh, can I have this? I want this." So you end up being sort of people pleasing. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I think that you're in a quite unique position in social. There are other departments that will resonate with this. So for example, if you're the e-commerce team, everybody can see the website. Same with if you're a social media manager, everybody can see your Twitter. So like your work is so visible, as opposed to potentially if I take, for example, the legal department, like nobody is looking at the contracts that you're writing in legal apart from the people that you're dealing with internally, but the entire business is looking at your LinkedIn profile that you're managing. So I think you're in quite, as I said, quite a unique position where everybody can comment on the work that you're doing because it's there for anyone to see. It's in the public domain. So I think that as a result, as a social media manager, you do feel that pressure where you're trying to make sure that the work that you're doing is good enough to please everyone in the business, which of course it never will be.
So I think you would say that on that, you need a thick skin. A skill is to have a thick skin when working in social.
Oh yeah, yeah, because it's not just it's not just internally as well. It's the community. You know, your comment section, particularly if you are managing a large brand. So you know, we'll get thousands and thousands of comments on a post, and then they're not all positive. You know, that some of them are quite difficult to read sometimes because they'll be talking about the work that you and your team are doing. So yeah, that can be quite challenging, I think.
What are other essential skills do you think? I know you've touched on a few of them before, but what other essential skills does a good social media need in 2021?
I think you've got to be creative. It probably goes without saying. I think you've got to have that intrinsic creativity within you to want to create content that your audience is going to enjoy. I think you've got to be quite analytical and able to like sift through like you know your audience and where they might be and how you're going to create content that like serves your objectives and your goals, but also looking at what's performing and what's performing well and why that might be in the landscape of social media. So I think you've got to have an analytical mind. But I think probably the biggest thing that's really, really important as a social media manager is I think you've just got to have empathy, really, for your audience. You've got to listen to them because your audience is telling you what they want to see. They're telling you what they want to know. So your content strategy has to evolve to suit what you're being told every day, whether that be through the number of people engaging, whether that be through the sentiment in the comments or the DMs that are coming through.
Absolutely. It's like when you sort of consider all the different hats a social media manager has. Um, I've never been asked, like, whenever there's never been a sort of test really in my interviews when I go for roles and stuff about the empathy chip. You know, what Work in Social does is expose the kind of like mistakes that people can make and sort of, you know, the things that can go wrong and the kind of emotional stress of like working in social. Am I allowed to ask what are the biggest mistake in social working in social you have made so far in your career without going too much into it? What is the biggest mistake that you've made? You're like, oh my lord, my world is going to end.
I mean, I've got so many. I have got so many. I've got obviously all the ones that you'd probably guess, or we posted the wrong things, or like started a live and then had to restart it because I thought it wasn't filming, but turns out it was filming. So like halfway through, it just was like, oh, hang on a second, I'm just gonna now start this live, and they were like, no, no, you are actually live. I was like, oh my god, this is so embarrassing.
No.
So yeah, all of those things. But I have big ones that I can't reveal because, well, quite honestly, like I would just get in a lot of trouble to talk about what has gone wrong from a massive standpoint. But I think maybe one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my career that I think maybe serves as like a piece of advice as well is not really like paying attention to the different social media platforms and what was right. So like very, very early on, I think I would just like write something for Facebook. I just copy paste it for Pinterest, copy paste it for Twitter, copy paste it for Instagram, and just like hope for the best, not really creating content that was actually like relevant. You know, that was like way back at the beginning. So as I said, I've learned everything by trial and error, and that was, you know, really one of the biggest mistakes I think I made early on in my career is not actually like properly using the platforms in a way that a native user would do.
So no, nothing juicy about the wrong kind of like no trade secrets are gonna come out of you. Even though I'm gonna try, I trying hard, but I won't get it out of you. I know that now. That's fine. So you've worked a lot everywhere. You've picked up enough um, knowledge and experience to be running your own team. How would you summarize your, you know, social media journey from where you started to where you are now?
Oh, it's honestly just chaotic, I think.
You can't say that. I'm sorry, you can't say that it's been chaotic after saying all the brilliant things you've said to me and say chaotic. I'm not sure I can accept that as an answer.
I think it's yeah, I think I talk a good talk, don't I? I make it sound like it's been really straightforward, but absolutely it has not been. This my entire career has been about trying things and then just mostly watching them crumble in flames and realizing that that's not the way to do things. So yeah, I think it's all been about trial and error, and just throwing things up against the wall and seeing if they stick. Really, I'd say very much chaotic. It's also been all over the shop. I haven't always done social, so I've worked in events, I've done program management, and I think I've picked up a lot of skills there along the way as well. So yeah, I think if that's an answer for you, just here, there, everywhere, learning as I go, always moving forward, never looking back unless it's to make sure that I'm getting better.
Brilliant. So where do you think, on the topic of going forward, what do you think is the future of social media for, I won't say your industry because I don't know what industry you work in, but social media as a whole, where do you think the future is going?
God, I mean, if I knew that, then, I'd probably be making a fortune right now. But I think there's probably some key things that are going to be really important for social over the next few years. One, I think, is shopping and the commercialization of platforms like Instagram, even TikTok, Pinterest, etc. There's obviously huge pushes. I think particularly after the introduction of like iOS 14.5 or whatever it was that stopped event tracking, etc., or made it a lot harder for our paid teams. So I think keeping everything with an app is going to be a huge push from the platforms themselves, and I think that capitalising on that is going to be, hopefully, I say that with fingers crossed, quite lucrative for many brands. So I think social shopping. But I think as well, one of the things that I'm constantly thinking about is like the ethics of social media and where that's going to go, and like the data protection, making sure that young people are being properly protected as they're going into the social sphere. So I think that we will, I hope, actually see regulation of social media coming in the future. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the timeline is for that. But I think about like, somebody like myself, like when Facebook was first coming to light, I think I was 18. So I missed a lot of that feeling of growing up online on social media. But now you have like 12, 13-year-olds who are looking at things like TikTok with all of the filters, and that is now like informing how they think about themselves. So I think that there will hopefully come regulation. I think it has to.
But we're going to go on to the next thing, which is our quick fire round. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions, and you cannot think too much about what you're going to say. You're going to have to be instinctive about it, okay? But they're going to be fun, and they're not going to be too hard. Are you ready?
Yeah.
iOS or Android?
iOS.
Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse?
Probably neither.
Oh my god. Most used emoji?
Crying, laughing face.
First social media platform that you signed up to?
Facebook. No, MySpace.
If you could run any social media channel for any brand, which would it be?
Spark Notes. I keep atting them and telling them I want a job with them, and they keep just double tapping and liking it. And I'm like, no, I'm being serious.
Spark Notes is brilliant. No one acknowledges that. Like, Spark Notes is so funny, and it's really great for like the nerds who did like A-level English lit, which I feel like you did.
No, I did not, but I really appreciate a good literary pun. They are brilliant. But yeah, are like completely ghosting me.
So I think that is everything today with Work in Social. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all your knowledge and your tips and your advice. Where can people find you?
They can find me at Work in Social, they said, on Instagram, at Work in Social on Twitter.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.